Dominic confronts Nina about Gabriel's interest in her. Nina stands up to Dominic, calling out his years of ignoring her revelation. Dominic stayed away because he knew he couldn't have her without consuming her. The internal betrayal comes to a head. Gabriel was working against Dominic. Dominic breaks his engagement, choosing Nina despite the consequences. Final confrontation with rivals in Gabriel's betrayal. Dominic publicly claims Nina as his dum-dum-dum, as his dum-dana. Consequences be damned. Part 1. The invisible accountant woman nobody, Nina Moretti, had perfected the art of being invisible. In a world of loud men, expensive suits, and barely hidden violence, she had learned to move through rooms like smoke present, but unnoticed, essential, but forgettable. For 3 years, she had sat in the weekly meetings at the Castellano compound, her leather notebook open, her pen moving across pages filled with numbers that kept millions of dollars flowing cleanly through legitimate businesses while hiding the dirty truth underneath. She was good at her job. Better than good, actually. At 25, Nina could spot money laundering patterns that federal investigators missed. She could create paper trails that led nowhere and everywhere simultaneously. She understood the delicate balance between appearing legitimate and actually being criminal. And that skill made her invaluable to the Castellano family. It also made her completely invisible to the one man she wished would see her, the weekly ritual Thursday. Afternoons followed the same pattern. Nina would arrive at the Castellano estate at exactly 2 o'clock, park her modest sedan between the expensive sports cars and luxury vehicles, and make her way to the conference room. She always chose the same seat forth from the head of the table, close enough to present when called upon, but far enough to avoid direct attention. The room would fill with soldiers, captains and associates. Her brother Rico usually arrived early, dropping into the seat beside her with a grin that reminded her of simpler times when they were just kids, stealing pastries from their grandmother's kitchen. Now Rico carried a gun under his tailored jacket and had scars he never talked about. "You bring the Henderson reports?" Rico asked, his voice low. Nina nodded, patting her leather portfolio. "Everything's clean. The audit won't find anything. That's my genius sister." Rico's pride was genuine, but it always made Nina uncomfortable. She wasn't proud of what she did. She was good at it, yes. Pride seemed wrong when your talent involved helping criminals hide their crimes. When the storm walked in, the room would fall silent before Nina even registered the change. It was instinctive, this response to power. Every man in the room would straighten slightly, conversations would die mid-sentence, and the air itself seemed to thicken with anticipation. Dominic Castellano. Nina kept her eyes on her notebook, but her body betrayed her. Her pulse quickened. Her breath became shallow. Her skin prickled with awareness of his presence. Even though he was across the room and had never once looked at her with anything approaching interest, she risked a glance. Just a fraction of a second and saw him take his place at the head of the table. Dominic wore a navy suit that emphasized his powerful build. It's the kind of body that came from years of boxing and street fighting before the money and power arrived. His dark hair was styled perfectly, though one stubborn strand fell across his forehead. His jaw was sharp enough to cut glass, and his brown eyes held an intensity that made grown men nervous. At 34, Dominic Castellano ruled the city's underworld with calculated precision. He was brilliant, ruthless, and completely untouchable. Men respected him out of fear. Women wanted him out of fascination. And Nina, foolish girl that she was, had managed to fall for him despite knowing it was the stupidest thing she could possibly do. The meetings, nobody remembered the meeting proceeded like clockwork. Territory disputes were discussed and resolved. A shipment problem at the docks required attention. Various business fronts reported their numbers, the legitimate ones, and the coded messages about the illegal operations underneath. When it came time for Nina's financial report, she stood and distributed her prepared documents. She moved around the table with practiced efficiency, placing papers in front of men who barely glanced at her. She was furniture to them. Useful furniture, but furniture nonetheless. She saved Dominic's report for last, approaching the head of the table with her heart hammering stupidly against her ribs. As she leaned forward to place the document before him, She caught the scent of his cologne, something expensive with notes of leather and smoke. Her hand trembled slightly. Dominic didn't look up. His attention remained fixed on the previous speaker. His fingers drumming a slow rhythm on the mahogany table, Nina returned to her seat. Swallowing the familiar disappointment, she delivered her report in a clear, professional voice. Profit margins were up. 3 subsidiary accounts needed restructuring to avoid federal attention. The Luxembourg holdings required a different approach to the quarterly transfers. It was thorough work, the kind that required both mathematical brilliance and an understanding of criminal enterprise. When she finished, Dominic gave a single nod. Good work, he said, but he was looking at Rico, not her. Your sister knows her business. Make sure she stays on the Eastern accounts. Those words shouldn't have made Nina's chest tighten with pathetic pleasure, but they did. After 3 years, this was what she had second-hand acknowledgement delivered through her brother. The announcement that changed everything. The meeting ended, and Nina gathered her materials slowly. She wanted to leave, to escape to her small apartment, where she could pretend that her feelings didn't exist, where she could convince herself that she was fine with being invisible. But Rico caught her arm. Hey, before you go, there's something you should know. Nina looked at her brother's face and saw concern there, the kind that made her stomach drop. What? Dominic's getting engaged. Official announcement is tomorrow night at the estate. Francesca Di Luca is flying in from Milan. The world tilted slightly. Nina gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. Francesca Di Luca, she repeated, her voice sounding distant to her own ears. The fashion designer, and daughter of the Di Luca family. It's a merger, basically. Combines 2 of the biggest operations in the region.
Oh.
Rico squeezed her shoulder. I know this is hard for you, Neen, but maybe it's for the best. Maybe now you can finally move on. Nina forced herself to nod, to smile, to act like her heart wasn't shattering into 1,000 pieces. Yeah, maybe you're right. But as she drove home through the city streets, past the buildings and businesses that the Castellano family controlled, Nina couldn't stop the tears from falling. She had spent 3 years loving a man who didn't know she existed, and now he was marrying someone else. It was time to let go. It was time to finally, truly become invisible. The Castellano estate blazed with lights and music on Friday evening. Nina stood in her bedroom, staring at the black dress hanging on her closet door, seriously considering calling in sick. But Rico had already texted her 3 times, reminding her that her absence would be noticed and questioned. So she put on the dress, applied minimal makeup, and drove to the estate with a knot of dread in her stomach. The ballroom was packed with the city's elite, both legitimate and criminal. Champagne flowed freely. A string quartet played in the corner. And at the center of it all stood Dominic Castellano and Francesca Di Luca. Francesca was stunning, tall, elegant, with the kind of effortless beauty that came from expensive genetics and even more expensive maintenance. She wore a red dress that probably cost more than Nina's car. She held onto Dominic's arm with casual ownership. They looked perfect together. A matched set of powerful, beautiful people who belonged in this world of wealth and violence. Nina grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and downed it in 3 swallows. Easy there, a warm voice said beside her. The night's just getting started. Nina turned and found Gabriel Torres smiling at her. Gabriel was Dominic's underboss, his second in command, one of the few men in the organization who had ever treated her like an actual person. He was handsome, in a classic way, dark eyes, warm smile, the kind of charm that made people trust him right before he destroyed them. I'm not much for parties, Nina admitted. Neither am I, actually. Too much pretending. Gabriel's eyes studied her face with genuine interest. You look beautiful, by the way. That dress is perfect on you. Nina felt heat rise to her cheeks. Compliments from men in this world usually came with ulterior motives, but Gabriel seemed sincere. Thank you. Dance with me. Gabriel extended his hand. Nina hesitated. Dancing meant visibility. Dancing meant people noticing her. But the alternative was standing alone, watching Dominic with his perfect fiancée. Slowly dying inside, she took Gabriel's hand. The dance that started everything, Gabriel was a good dancer. leading her through the waltz with practiced ease. They moved across the floor, and for the first time in 3 years, Nina felt seen. Gabriel looked at her like she mattered, like she was interesting and worthy of attention. "I've been wanting to talk to you," Gabriel said as they turned. "About more than just business." "Oh. You're wasted in that office, Nina. Buried in ledgers when you should be appreciated properly." His hand tightened slightly on her waist. "You're brilliant. Beautiful. And I'd like to take you to dinner sometime. Away from all this." Nina's mind reeled. Gabriel Torres was asking her out. Gabriel Torres, who was handsome and powerful and actually paying attention to her. "I don't know if that's a good idea," she started to say, but Gabriel smiled. "Think about it. No pressure. Just know that I see you, Nina Moretti. I've been seeing you for a while now," eyes that burned across the room. What Nina didn't know, couldn't have known, was that across the ballroom, Dominic Castellano had stopped listening to Francesca mid-sentence. His champagne glass was gripped so tightly his knuckles had gone white. His jaw was clenched so hard his teeth hurt. He was watching Nina dance with Gabriel Torres. He was watching her smile at another man. He was watching her be seen by someone else, and something inside his carefully controlled chest was cracking apart. "Dominic, are you listening to me?" Francesca's voice held practiced irritation. Dominic downed his champagne in one swallow and turned to his fiancée with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Excuse me? I need to handle something." He walked away, leaving Francesca sputtering in surprise. His eyes locked on the woman in the black dress who had haunted his thoughts for 3 years. The Monday morning summons, Nina spent the weekend in turmoil. Gabriel had texted her twice, both messages sweet and interested. She should have been thrilled. She should have been ready to move on, to accept attention from a man who actually wanted her. Instead, she felt numb. Monday morning arrived with gray skies and drizzling rain. Nina, dressed in her most professional outfit, charcoal skirt, white blouse, hair pulled back in a neat bun. She was prepared to bury herself in work until her heart stopped aching. Then her phone buzzed with a message that made her blood run cold. "Report to main estate. Boss's private office. 8 a.m. Vincent. Nina stared at the message. In 3 years, she had never been summoned to Dominic's private office. Never. She drove to the estate with trembling hands, her mind spinning through every possible scenario. Had she made a mistake in the accounts? Had someone discovered her feelings? Was she being fired? She arrived at exactly 8 o'clock and was escorted by Vincent to a massive oak door she had never been through before. "Go ahead," Vincent said, his expression unreadable. "He's expecting you." Nina opened the door and stepped into Dominic Castellano's private world. The office where everything changed. The office was enormous. Dark wood paneling, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, leather furniture that probably cost more than Nina made in a year, and behind a massive mahogany desk sat Dominic, reviewing documents with laser focus. He didn't look up when she entered. 30 seconds passed, 45, a full minute. "Sit," he finally said, his voice cold and controlled. Nina sat, spine straight, hands folded in her lap. More silence. The tension in the room was suffocating. When Dominic finally looked up, his brown eyes pinned her in place with an intensity that stole her breath. "You're being reassigned," he said flatly. Nina's heart stopped. "Sir, you'll work directly for me now, exclusively. There's an office connected to this one." He nodded toward a door she hadn't noticed. "You'll be here every morning at 8 and leave when I say the work is done. Any questions?" Nina's mind spun. This was a promotion, technically. Working directly for Dominic meant more responsibility, more visibility, more everything she should want professionally. So why did it feel like a trap? "What about my current assignments?" "Redistributed." Dominic's jaw tightened. "From today forward, you work for me and only me." "But why?" "Because I said so." His voice dropped to a dangerous quiet. "Do you have a problem with that, Miss Moretti?" Nina swallowed hard. "No, sir. Good. Start now." The proximity that burned the connected office was smaller, but still impressive. Nina set up her laptop, arranged her files, and tried to pretend that her entire world hadn't just shifted on its axis. The door between their offices remained open. She could hear everything: his phone calls, the scratch of his pen, the quiet rhythm of his breathing. And she knew he could hear her too. It was intimacy of the most torturous kind. The first day passed in tense silence. They spoke only when necessary, maintained professional distance, pretended that the air between them wasn't crackling with something unspoken and dangerous. The second day, Dominic brought her coffee without asking how she took it. 3 creams, 1 sugar. Perfect. He set it on her desk without a word and walked away. Nina stared at that cup like it held the secrets of the universe. How did he know? By the third day, Nina was reviewing contracts when she found something wrong. Numbers that didn't add up. Money that disappeared into thin air. She stood and walked to Dominic's office, her heart pounding. "There's a problem with the Rossi contract," she said. Dominic looked up, and the weight of his gaze nearly knocked her over. "Show me." Nina approached his desk, spreading out her papers. She leaned over to point out the discrepancies, too focused on the numbers to notice how close they were. "Here," she said, pointing. 700,000 missing. Dominic studied the contracts, then looked at his computer. Nina waited, painfully aware of his presence, his scent, the way his shoulder was inches from hers. "You're right," he said quietly. "Rossi's skimming. What will you do?" "Handle it." His hand shot out and caught her wrist before she could pull away. The touch was electric. Nina froze, her eyes dropping to where his fingers wrapped around her skin. "Look at me." Dominic's voice was rough, nothing like his usual controlled tone. Nina lifted her eyes slowly, afraid of what she might see in his face. What she found there stole her breath completely. Hunger. Raw, undisguised hunger. "Why were you dancing with Gabriel?" The question came out harsh, almost angry. Nina blinked, confusion mixing with the electricity of his touch. "What? At the engagement party? You danced with him." You smiled at him. Dominic's grip on her wrist tightened, not painful, but possessive. "Answer me." "He asked me to dance." I said yes. "I didn't realize I needed your permission." The words came out sharper than she intended. 3 years of invisible frustration, finally finding a crack to slip through. "You don't need my permission." Dominic stood, and suddenly he was towering over her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "But you should know that watching you smile at another man made me want to put a bullet in his head." Nina's heart hammered against her ribs. "You're engaged, I know, to Francesca Di Luca." "Right, I know that too." "Then what are you doing?" Nina tried to pull her wrist free, but Dominic held firm. "What is this? Why did you really bring me here?" The truth that burned Dominic was silent for a long moment, his jaw working as if fighting some internal battle. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and raw. "For 3 years, I've watched you sit in those meetings. For 3 years, I've pretended you don't exist, because acknowledging you meant admitting something I couldn't afford to admit." His free hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "I stayed away from you, Nina Moretti, because I knew the moment I touched you I wouldn't be able to stop." Nina's breath hitched. This couldn't be real. This had to be some cruel dream. "You never even looked at me," she whispered. "I looked at you every single meeting. Every report you delivered, every time you walked through that room, I looked. I memorized every expression, every gesture, the way you bite your lip when you're concentrating, the way you tuck your hair behind your ear when you're nervous." His thumb moved to trace her lower lip. "I know you take your coffee with 3 creams and 1 sugar. I know you drive yourself crazy trying to find errors that don't exist. I know you're brilliant and beautiful and completely wasted on someone like me. Then why? Because I'm a selfish bastard who watched Gabriel Torres put his hands on you and decided I was done pretending?" Dominic's forehead dropped to rest against hers. "Tell me to stop. Tell me to let you go, to marry Francesca, to leave you alone. Tell me, Nina." Nina's hands had somehow found their way to his chest, feeling his heart racing beneath her palms. Every logical thought in her head screamed at her to push him away, to protect herself. to not fall deeper into this impossible situation. Instead, she whispered, "I can't." The kiss that changed everything. Dominic kissed her like a man drowning, and she was air. His mouth claimed hers with desperate intensity. 3 years of denial crashing through whatever walls he'd built to keep her away. Nina melted into him, her fingers clutching his shirt, her body arching against his as he backed her against the desk. It was everything she'd imagined, nothing like she'd expected. There was nothing gentle about this kiss, nothing careful or tentative. It was claiming and possessive and absolutely consuming. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dominic rested his forehead against hers again. "You're mine," he said. And it wasn't a question. "You've been mine for 3 years. I was just too much of a coward to claim you." "You're still engaged," Nina managed, though her resolve was crumbling with every second. Not for long. The betrayal revealed day's sharp knock at the door made them spring apart. Vincent entered without waiting for permission, his face grim. "Boss, we have a problem. It's Torres." Dominic's entire demeanor shifted in an instant, the passionate man replaced by the cold Mafia boss. "What about him?" "The Rossi contract you flagged to Torres authorized the payment structure. He's been working with Rossi to skim money from the Eastern operations for 6 months. We're talking millions." Nina's blood ran cold. Gabriel had been stealing from Dominic this entire time. "How much?" Dominic's voice was deadly quiet, close to 8 million based on preliminary numbers. Nina's mind raced through the accounts she'd reviewed, suddenly seeing patterns she'd missed before. "The Henderson accounts," she breathed. The timing of the transfers, I thought it was just inefficiency. But if Torres was deliberately creating delays, he could move money through gaps in the reporting schedule, Dominic finished. His eyes met hers, and she saw fury there, mixed with something else. Pride. You would have caught it eventually. "Maybe that's why he suddenly started paying attention to me," Nina said bitterly. "Keep the accountant distracted." Dominic's jaw clenched so hard she heard his teeth grind. "Where is he?" "Conference room with 3 of his guys." "He doesn't know we know yet." The confrontation, 10 minutes later, Nina stood beside Dominic in the conference room. Rico and 5 other soldiers blocking the exits. Gabriel sat at the table, his charming smile firmly in place, though his eyes had gone wary. "Boss, what's this about?" Dominic dropped a folder on the table in front of Gabriel. Nina's analysis, complete with highlighted transfers and traced accounts. "Want to explain why $8 million has disappeared from my operations over the past 6 months." Gabriel's smile faltered. His eyes flicked to Nina, and she saw the moment he realized his mistake. "I can explain. Please do." Dominic's voice could have frozen fire. "Explain how my underboss has been stealing from me. Explain how you thought you could use one of my people to cover your tracks. Explain why I shouldn't put a bullet in your head right now." "It was Rossi's idea," Gabriel said quickly. "He approached me and said we could make some money on the side. That you'd never notice, but Nina noticed." Dominic's hand came to rest on Nina's shoulder, a gesture of possession that made Gabriel's eyes narrow. "Because she's smarter than you ever gave her credit for. You thought she was just some quiet girl you could charm and distract. You had no idea what she's capable of." Gabriel's mask slipped entirely, revealing cold calculation underneath. "You're choosing her over the DeLuca alliance? Over everything we've built? I'm choosing loyalty over treachery. There's a difference." What happened next happened fast. Gabriel reached for the gun under his jacket, but he wasn't fast enough. Rico put him down with 2 shots before Gabriel's weapon cleared leather. The sound echoed through the room, final and absolute. Nina didn't flinch. She'd known this world was violent. She'd just never been at the center of it before. The choice later, after the cleanup. After the calls to Rossi's organization to handle their side of the problem, Nina stood in Dominic's office, staring out at the city lights. "I broke off the engagement," Dominic said from behind her. "Told Francesca this afternoon. The D. Lucas aren't happy, but they'll get over it." Wait. Nina turned to face him. "You're starting a war over me, mending one. The war I've been fighting with myself for 3 years." He crossed to her, taking her face in his hands. "You need to understand something, Nina. I don't do anything halfway. If you're mine completely. That means danger. That means living in this world with all its ugliness. That means being seen by everyone, not just me. I've been invisible my whole life, Nina said softly. Maybe it's time I was seen. Maybe it is. Dominic kissed her again, softer this time, like a promise. So what do you say, Miss Moretti? Ready to stop being invisible? Nina thought about 3 years of longing, of silent admiration, of loving someone who seemed completely out of reach. She thought about the risk, the danger, the impossibility of what he was offering. Then she thought about his hand on her wrist, the way he looked at her like she was the only person in the world, the coffee he'd brought without asking. I say yes, she whispered. I've always said yes. You just weren't listening. I'm listening now. Dominic pulled her close, and Nina let herself be claimed by the man who had ignored her for years until his jealousy finally made him admit the truth. She was his. She had always been his.